Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to pre-think assumptions. My name is Rajat Sandana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting me in this webinar is Ms. Komal Shah. Komal is a GMAT strategy expert at e-GMAT. She's also a former Beat the GMAT moderator, one of the earliest ones, and she's been helping students strategize their preparation for the last 4 years. In this webinar, we're going to look at pre-thinking. We're going to look at one of the core skills that you need to master GMAT critical reasoning. If you're aiming for that 90th percentile, then this is something that you should know. The webinar today is fairly application based, which means you're going to focus on applying pre-thinking and to make sure that you have that foundation that sets you up to be able to apply pre-thinking. We did send a few video lessons your way. They were on introduction to assumption, pre-thinking logical gap, and pre-thinking two entities. If you have not gone through these video lessons, do go through them. They are a part of your free trial. So just log into your e-GMAT account and you'd be able to get to these. We also have some upcoming webinars. This is actually the last verbal webinar of 2019. We have our last quant webinar of this year tomorrow. That's on algebra. That'll be hosted by Payal Tandon, who's my fellow co-founder. And then we have a free GMAT strategy webinar, which is the first webinar of 2020 on 4th of January at 7 a.m. Pacific. Again, if you've not registered for these, by just clicking on register now, you can do the same. So with this, I have about 105 students here in the webinar with me. Let's kind of get to know you guys a bit better. So I have a few questions your way. One is, when do you plan to take the test? And the second one is, what is your target GMAT score? Yeah, actually scroll this up, pull this question up. All right, in response to when do you plan to take the test, I have it's a fairly uniform group. My biggest segment here is about 25%. My smallest group here is about 13%. So many of you planning to the test within the next 15 days. Presumably you are still applying in R2. That's why the hurry. And then again, say we have more or less similar number of folks in every group. And about 23% of you have not taken your data as of yet. With regards to the target GMAT score, one clear peak over there in the 730 to 750 bracket. Other than that, again, similar number of folks in the 660 to 700, 710, 720, as well as 760 or higher. That's wonderful. With that, let me move to the webinar pane. The screen will change for you as I do that. And once the system has settled down for you, you're going to see a presentation which says CR1 pre-thinking for assumption. The number one indicates that it is a foundational skill, which we are going to focus on in this webinar. All right, so there's essentially three parts of this webinar. In the first part, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to e-GMAT. It's going to be about 12 minutes from now. The next part, we're going to go right into the core of this webinar. We're going to focus on pre-thinking. We're going to learn what it is. We're going to learn how to apply that. We're going to solve questions using this method, and we're going to look at how you can move forward from this webinar to make sure that pre-thinking becomes second nature to you. And then towards the end, if you still have questions which are pertaining to critical reasoning, pertaining to the aspect of quant or verbal, or in general about your MBA application, you'll have about 20 minutes for an open-ended Q&A. Okay, with that, let's get started with an introduction to e-GMAT. So I asked this question earlier what's your target GMAT score? And a good number of you said, in fact, about 60% of you said that the target GMAT score is 720 or higher. And while that may be the case statistically, only 6% of the people get to that score of 720 or higher. And this is despite the fact that when you look at the trend for median scores at top B schools, they've consistently been going up. In fact, if you want to aim for one of the top 25 B schools, you should get a score of 730 or higher, if you're aiming for a scholarship from these particular universities. And this is data from MBA.com and from a couple of other places such as Poets and Quants, as well as from our own blog. So what is it that people who get to these scores do? A good percentage of them use e-GMAT. Why do I say that? When you look at two stats, one is the number of verified reviews on major forums. The second is the number of success stories that have been posted in the last 12 months on major forums. What you're going to find is that e-GMAT's reviewed a lot more frequently than any of the other major prep companies, as well as when you look at the number of success stories, more success stories have been posted for e-GMAT, um, or rather, students mention e-GMAT as a reason for their success than they mention any of the other prep companies. In fact, if you look at October, November, you're going to find about 60% of the success stories that have been posted on GMAT Club Share, GMAT Experience Forum actually mention credit e-GMAT for their success. So what makes our students more successful? And there's one thing, if I were to point out with regards to what makes our students more successful, it's the architecture of learning we provide, or what we call as our approach to your GMAT preparation. So let's kind of look at the architecture of learning that exists in the world today. So when you think about architectures of learning that exist, there are essentially two different architectures that exist today. One is what we call as the book-based architecture, and the second is a private tutoring-based architecture. Most of the GMAT courses that you see in the industry today are built around this book-based approach. They may be audiovisual, they may provide quizzes, but their core learning architecture is this book-based architecture. When you look at your e-GMAT course and try to map it to one of these two architectures, you're going to find that we are much more aligned with the private tutoring-based architecture. In fact, we are actually more aligned with this architecture than a real person is today, and I'll tell you why I make that statement. Okay, so let's see how is it that one architecture is much more in tune when helping you get to that 720 or higher score versus the other. So how do you get to that 720 or higher score? If you want to get to a 720, 740, or 760, the first thing you need to do is to create a personalized path to that score. You need to know how long are you going to get to that how long do you need to get to that score, where are you going to spend the time, and how are you going to track that improvement, what metrics are you going to aim for. Then you need to start learning, and while learning the concepts, you need to make sure that you actually have learned the concepts. Just simply reading a book doesn't ensure that you learn the concepts. There have to be verifiable metrics. Then simply knowing those concepts isn't enough. You need to know how to apply those concepts as well. And you need to get so good at applying those concepts that you attain a level of mastery that puts you in the top 5 percentile or top 2 percentile or top 1 percentile bracket. Okay. So let's see how a book-based architecture tackles this problem. A book-based architecture is all about autonomy, which means when you study using a book, you get a couple of study plans, a verbal focused, a quant focused study plan, and you've got to choose one of those study plans. Beyond that, there's very little personalization that's possible in a book-based learning architecture. Then you start learning concepts by reading chapters in a book or watching videos over there. Now, there's some really good books which are sources of learning concepts. The only problem really is books don't provide feedback. So when you learn about 100 concepts from a book, and you actually learn each of those concepts to slightly varying degree of effectiveness. But books don't tell you where you need to revise a certain thing and where you've actually crossed a threshold. So that burden of validation on a concept-based learning is entirely on the student. When it comes to application of concepts, that's where, in my opinion, books actually falter the most. Why? Because in a book-based architecture, it's very difficult to explain when you approach a problem, what do you need to do in step 1, what do you need to do in step 2, what do you need to do in step 3. Also, the validation as to whether you mastered each of those steps is not there. Now, some people do master application in the book-based architecture, but they are the best and the brightest. A majority of the folks do not master application. And when it comes to evaluation of mastery, people who follow book-based architecture, they actually rely on taking mock tests. And then again, taking a mock test is a big endeavor. And even when you take a mock test, that onus of evaluation and figuring out what to do next is completely on the student. More often than not, students draw wrong inferences, take their preparation in a direction that is not the most optimum. A private tutoring-based architecture works entirely differently. If you want to work with a good private tutor will create a personalized study plan for you. They'll evaluate your strengths, will evaluate your weaknesses, will create an estimate of how long should you need to get to that target GMAT score? Where should you spend that time? And create metrics for you such that if you attain those metrics, you get to that score. Then a good private tutor starts teaching you concepts and will constantly evaluate you while you're learning those concepts. Once you learn a few concepts, a good private tutor will also teach you how to apply those concepts. They'll tell you, hey, what do you need to do in step 1, step 2, step 3, and as you're solving questions, he'll constantly evaluate you. And once you get so good at applying a set of concepts, a good private tutor will tell you, now it's time for you to move from, hey, sentence correction to critical reasoning, or modifiers to parallelism, or assumption to evaluate, and so on and so forth. So what are the key differences in these two approaches? I think you're learning the same content, but the extent of personalization, the extent of evaluation, the extent of learning application is much more in that private tutor-based approach. And it's no surprise that this architecture leads to much higher success on a test such as the GMAT, where you have to be better than others, where not half the people get 90th percentile, only the top 10 percentile or top 10% of the students who take the test get to that 90th percentile or higher. So let's see, why do we say that most of the other courses are built around this book-based architecture, whereas e-GMAT is built around this private tutoring-based approach. And we're going to take a case study of someone who wants to go from a score of 600 to a 720. So the first thing that a private tutor-based architecture does is it creates a personalized study plan. At e-GMAT, every student gets to do this. To do that, we actually first define or evaluate your abilities in 5 key subsections. These are the subsections that the GMAT tests you on. 3 in verbal, 2 in quant. Then, based on your starting abilities, we create your own personalized milestones using an AI-driven tool. And based on those starting abilities, we also personalize your learning. So let's see how we do that. To quantify your starting abilities, we ask you to take a sigma x mock. It's an e-GMAT mock. It's the only mock test in the industry that is built on independent ability engines. Very similar to what the official exam is. It has independent ability engines in SCCR and RC and arithmetic and algebra. It also gives an ESR plus analysis, which means more analytics than what your enhanced score report does. Again, the only mock in the industry to do that. Then we feed that data into an AI-driven tool called GMAT Planner. And this GMAT planner then creates your own personalized study plan. So let's say these are your starting quant and verbal scores, which we feed into GMAT planner. This is actually the GMAT planner interface. Then using your quant and verbal scores, it creates an estimate of your target quant, target verbal score to reach that 720 score. Now you can modify that estimate if you don't like. It will always auto adjust to get to that 720. So then it tells you how should you achieve that Q50 and that V38. What's the most optimal way for you to achieve those 2 scores? And again, it does that using the database of upwards of 10,000 score ESRs that we've fed to GMAT Planner. So when you do this, your overall GMAT preparation becomes a set of 5 different milestones. 2 in quant, you can see the starting abilities on the left and the target abilities on the right, and 3 in verbal. It then creates your study plan telling you how long you need to spend on each subsection to attain that ability. So for example, and let me actually pause my webcam over here. Let's go over here. So for example, in this case, you have to spend about 1.4 weeks to go from 59 percentile in arithmetic to 83 percentile in arithmetic, or about 2.1 weeks over here to go from a 50th percentile in sentence correction to an 89th percentile in sentence correction. So these are estimates that are created for you. Then it tells you when should you study each. So it gives you a calendar view. Let me actually move forward over here. It gives you a calendar view which says, hey, this is the amount of time you're going to spend on a weekend and a weekday. These are your starting dates. This is when you can take the GMAT. This is when you're going to study a particular subsection. And again, this is completely customizable for those of you who plan to put in more hours, let's say 5 to 6 hours per day studying. You can customize that. The plan adjusts this automatically. Let me bring my camera up again. Okay, let's move forward. So you spend upwards of 1,000 hours building this utility so that each one of you can create your own personalized study plan in 7 minutes or fewer. Once you have those starting abilities, it takes us 7 minutes to do all of this. Okay. Then the next piece that a private tutor does is teaches you concepts and gives you feedback on them as you're learning those concepts. Let's see how we do this. This is one of the 14 modules that we have in our sentence correction course. It's a subject verb module. What you really see over here is that you learn a concept, we evaluate you right then and there, and we give you feedback on it. We also track how much time you take to learn a particular concept. By comparison, if you look at another popular course, this is the Magoosh verbal course, what you see over here is an architecture. It's very similar to a book-based approach where you have some lessons. There's really no feedback. In fact, even this time over here is the length of the video. It's not the time that you spent on that particular lesson. Then a private tutor, once you get feedback on the conceptual level, teaches you how to apply those concepts. And to do that, we have a special file called an application file in which we teach you how do you approach a question which tests concepts in subject verb, and how, what do you do in step 1, what do you do in step 2, what do you do in step 3. Then we evaluate you on it, again giving you feedback on it, and then we serve a set of official questions to you as well. The goal really is, once you learn a few concepts, you can actually learn how to apply them and really get better at that. There was a question over here. Rohit said, Saurav said, can AI-driven tool evaluate my pre-thinking? Actually, right in every pre-thinking file, there's evaluation built in. So in the pre-thinking module in critical reasoning, you have 12 evaluations that you go through. In fact, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'd really see how 760 scorers perform on those evaluations. There are benchmarks that exist over there. And this is how every module, whether it's a quant module or a verbal module, is architected. And we have close to 100 such modules on our GMAT online course. Again, let's go back to the Magoosh course. You see there's no application file. The focus on teaching you how to apply stuff is not there. You have this one quiz at the end, and this one quiz, doesn't give you the score. It has 5 questions, and it's common not just to subject verb, but also to auxiliary verbs as well as to pronouns. So again, the targeting, the feedback, the personalization is missing. The next piece is evaluation of mastery. You've been studying subject verb or you've been studying sentence correction for a fairly long time. How do you know that you've actually mastered this, which was the question over there? And to do that, we created a tool called Scholarinium. It's the world's most popular assessment tool in the context of GMAT. It actually is the highest rated tool on GMAT Club. In Scholarinium, you have ability quizzes. You take, after you've gone through the sentence correction course, to see whether you've hit that 90th percentile, you don't need to take a mock test. You just take an SC ability quiz. It gives you your ability scores. Not only that, it tells you where should you need to focus on. It has analytics built in there. In this case, clearly, this student needs to focus on comparison. And the beauty of this is the guy can go back to the comparison module, revise the relevant files, come back, take another ability quiz, and do that round tripping within a day and a half, and make sure that he or she gets to that 90th percentile in sentence correction. So you can really see why is it that we say most of the other courses are built around this book-based approach, whereas e-GMAT is built around this private tutoring-based architecture. So, and you can also see why is it that while only 6% of the people get to that 720 score, a good percentage of them use e-GMAT. With that, I've come to the end of my introduction to e-GMAT. Hopefully gives you an idea of how we approach your learning. If you want to connect with me and stay updated with all things e-GMAT, you can connect with me on my LinkedIn account. I have close to 13,000 students who are connected with me over there. It'll also allow you to, we post about 5 or 6 fresh articles every week. You'll also be able to connect to top students at every students at every top business school. Also on our YouTube channel, which has about 8,000 subscribers, you can really see success stories of upwards of 150 students, and these are unedited interviews that you can see over there. Okay, with that, let's go into pre-thinking, which is the core of this webinar. Okay, so with regards to pre-thinking, we're gonna here's the structure we'll follow. We're gonna look at how you approach questions today. Then we're gonna do a pre-thinking exercise. We're gonna look at two different arguments. Then we'll look at full-length questions, and we're gonna solve two full-length questions. So there'll be official questions, and we're gonna do them as a quiz, which means you're gonna solve these questions by yourself. Then I'm gonna apply pre-thinking to these questions. We're gonna look at the negation test, and then we're gonna really see where do you go from here. I mean, how can you make how can you make pre-thinking second nature for you? And where can you get more practice resources that come with good solutions? So essentially, at a very high level, we'll document how you prepare today. We'll recognize what is important when it comes to getting to that 90th percentile. And then we'll look at what should your next steps be. Okay. So with that, let's discuss your current approach to critical reasoning. Let me get in a poll question. So before we go there, I want to make sure that you guys understand what pre-thinking is. Pre-thinking is thinking of one potential assumption in your mind in 15 seconds before you start looking at answer choices. Okay. And again, I want to make sure that that's something that the definition is really clear. And we were the first company to define what pre-thinking actually is. It's a term that has existed in the GMAT world for quite some time, but it was always equated to predicting the answer. Pre-thinking is not predicting the answer. The goal of pre-thinking is that you comprehend the logic of the argument. So that's why when it comes to pre-thinking, we are only thinking of one potential assumption. Now remember, in an argument, you can have multiple assumptions, okay? But we're only focused on just one assumption. And we want to do this before you start looking at the answer choices. The moment you look at answer choices, you can throw pre-thinking out of the window. Okay. So with that, let's look at the two methodologies when it comes to answering CR questions that exist today. And I want you to tell me which methodology do you follow. Methodology one is read the argument, go to the answer choices, and do back and forth between the argument and the answer choices till you reach the final candidate. Methodology two is that you read the argument, you pre-think the assumption, and then look at the answer choices. You come back to the argument only if you need to. Let's get a few more responses. The question is, which methodology do you follow? I have 56, 57 responses so far. I have close to 130 students in the webinar. Let's get to at least 80 responses. 70, 71, 74, 75, 79, 80. Perfect. Let me broadcast results in the poll over here. And essentially, you see about 50-50. Half the class follows the pre-thinking approach, the other half follows the non-pre-thinking approach. Okay, let's see if we can make some of you folks who don't follow the pre-thinking approach start following it. Then the next piece is only for those who follow the pre-thinking approach. The question says, where do you spend the biggest chunk of your time? And you have the three options over there. Where do you spend the biggest chunk of your time while solving a CR question? And again, pre-thinking is not limited to assumption. You apply pre-thinking and evaluate. You apply pre-thinking and strengthen, weaken, MOR, and even boldface questions. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Good. I have about 70 answers here. Let me end the poll, broadcast the results. And it's no surprise, if you follow the pre-thinking approach, the biggest chunk of your time is going to be spent on reading and understanding the argument. If you're spending the biggest chunk of your time in selecting the correct answer, which is option 3 over here, then essentially you're not pre-thinking in the right manner. Okay, with that, let's learn how to pre-think. Okay, so a lot of you know have been solving CR questions here. You've been studying for the test for some time. Why don't you tell me what is an assumption? What's the definition of an assumption? Here's a short answer poll. What is an assumption? Okay. All right, an unstated information on which conclusion is based on, an unstated statement that gives to the conclusion a statement that must be true, okay. Missing premise, a hidden detail, something which is obvious, okay. What must be true in order for the conclusion to be true, okay. All right, so that's a lot of different kinds of definitions over there. And then some really good, others not so precise. And you're going to really look at this. I'm going to have one other piece over here. I'm going to show you a very simple argument, and I want you to tell me what does the author assume in that argument. Let me move this over here. So here's the argument. Joe scored 500 on the GMAT, therefore he will not get into an Ivy League college. What does the author assume while making that claim? And these are just errors. You know, this is an argument that's very close to your heart, and so I think a lot of you would be able to do this. Would be able to do this correctly. Now, I'm not broadcasting results, so as you put in enter, you will probably not see your response being there, but I am getting the response. I have about 19 responses already, 21, 24. 31 responses, 35. Let's get to about 50, and then I'm going to broadcast results. That way we'll have, you know, a good solid number set of responses. 42, 44, 45, 48, 49. Let's get one more. 50. Perfect. I'm going to broadcast results so you can really see the responses. Most of you have gotten the right assumption. Some of you have actually rewritten the conclusion, but a majority of the group is on the money. So the author, let's kind of look at the structure of this argument. The author in the first statement gives you a data point that Joe scored 500 on the GMAT. And now then in the second statement, the author makes a claim saying that, hey, therefore, and the word therefore connects the prior statement to the next statement. It says he will not get admission in an Ivy League college. So he kind of does what we call as a jump, logic jump over here. And then there's a score of 500 on the GMAT. And based on that, he says the author will not get admission into an Ivy League college. So the assumption really is that a score of 500 on the GMAT for someone like Joe is unacceptable to Ivy League colleges. Most of you got it right. Most of you got the logic of it right. The only other aspect that I'm adding to this is this part over here, which probably no one did, which is that someone like Joe. Most of you said score of 500. Ivy Leagues do not take students with score of 500 or lower, or you need more than 500 to get into an Ivy League college. While that is a statement that may be true, it will strengthen. Remember, an assumption is always tied to the conclusion, and the conclusion specifically talks about Joe. So the assumption has to be in that context as well. Because remember, the author is not saying the Prince of Saudi Arabia will not get into an Ivy League college with that score of 500. What the author is saying is Joe will not get into an Ivy League college with a score of 500. So just one point to keep into account. So with that, let's see what an assumption is. An assumption, and these are your responses that you put in over here. An assumption is an unstated idea, which means it's not something that you can infer from the argument that must be true for the conclusion to be valid. So There are two parts to this. First part is an assumption is a non-obvious information. You can't infer that information. It's an unstated idea. An assumption always provides new information. The second piece is that an assumption must be true for the conclusion to remain valid, which means, and we're going to spend close to 90% of our time on this must be true aspect of assumption over here. Why? Because this is what the test actually will try and trick you on the must be true aspect. So what does must be true means? It means that without the assumption in place, the conclusion can be broken down. Okay, the assumption is like that shield that protects the conclusion from being broken down. Your correct answer choice will satisfy both these conditions. And if you were to just visualize this, think of a house over here and where the conclusion is this particular roof. Okay, that's your conclusion. Now you see three pillars that are actually supporting this roof. Now each one of these three pillars adds strength to the roof. But only one of these three pillars, just 1 second guys, why the hell? Only one of these three pillars is an essential pillar which is required for that roof to stay upright over there, and that pillar is that central pillar, and that is your assumption. So this one is your assumption. It's the only pillar that is required for the roof to stay upright over there. The other two pillars make the roof stronger, but they are not essential pillars. And why am I showing you and why am I telling you this? Why? Because when you solve a more sophisticated assumption question, you're going to see answer choices that may be tempting, that will feel like they're the right assumptions, but they would be strengtheners and not the must be true kind. And so you've got to really understand that evaluation of what does must be true mean when it comes to selecting the correct assumption. And then as we solve questions, in fact, the second question that we solve after this point will really test this aspect. It's an official question, and you're going to see how the answer choices are constructed to make you choose one of these supporting pillars rather than the actual assumption. So just to reiterate, what does must be true mean? It means that if the information provided by assumption is not true, then the conclusion can no longer hold true, or the assumption or the conclusion will break down. So, or in other words, the assumption must be there for the conclusion to remain valid. So if that's the case, then what does falsification of conclusion mean? What does breaking down the conclusion mean? Let's kind of look at this. And we're going to look at the same argument, the simple argument that we had. Why? Because it's something that's very close to your heart. You guys understand this inside out. So in this case, what does this mean that, hey, the conclusion can be destroyed? Or under what scenario will the conclusion be destroyed? Can anyone write down? How can we destroy the conclusion? How can we destroy the conclusion? No, under what scenario? Under what scenario? Let me just rephrase my question. When would the conclusion be destroyed? A couple of you have gotten the right correct answer. The conclusion is destroyed if Joe gets admission into an Ivy League college with a score of 500. Can everyone see this? If this thing happens, then the conclusion will be destroyed, right? If this happens, the author can no longer say, therefore, he will not get admission in an Ivy League college. And a couple of you actually got this right. Yes, no? Can you type it down in the short answer pod? Perfect. Okay. So let's see how do we evaluate whether the correct answer choice that we came up with is actually the correct answer. So this was the assumption that we said as the correct assumption, and it seemed right to us. But let's see how. Let's do a formal proof as to how we figure out whether that's something which is a must be true answer choice. So we asked us, is this must be true? Or in other words, will Joe get admission or will conclusion break down if the statement to the left no longer holds true? So if the statement to the left no longer holds true, then what happens when you say when a statement no longer holds true, then its negated instance automatically becomes true. I want to just repeat this part. It's something that not a lot of people know. When you say a statement is no longer true, its negated instance automatically becomes true. So if you say this statement on the left is no longer true, then this instance automatically becomes true, that a score of 500 for someone like Joe is acceptable to Ivy League colleges or Ivy League schools. If that is true, then what happens to my conclusion? Does the conclusion break down? Absolutely, yes. Why? If the score of 500 is acceptable for someone like Joe, then the author cannot make his conclusion with 100% certainty that Joe will not get admission in an Ivy League college. Now, some of you may be thinking, how can I say that when a statement is no longer true, then its negated instance automatically becomes true? Let's kind of see this piece over here. This is essentially, applying the negation test. So how many of you are confused as to how can you say that when a statement is not true, its negated instance automatically becomes true? How many of you are confused with that part? Because that's kind of the key to all of this. Okay, I have one guy, a couple of you are. Let's kind of look at this over here. Let's take an example. If I say, let's look at the statement, Harvard has the best MBA program. If you say that this statement is not true, then by definition, are you also not saying that Harvard does not have the best MBA program or an MBA program that is better than or as good as Harvard exists? By definition, are you not saying that when you say that this statement is not true? Okay, and that's kind of the negated instance of that statement, right? Let's take another statement here. John runs faster than David. Okay, if you say that statement is not true, in that case, you're automatically saying that David runs as fast as or faster than John. Right? So when you say a statement isn't true, by definition, you're saying its negated instance is true. Okay. So the takeaway over here, and this is a very important takeaway, you may want to take some time to write it down. If the answer choice is the correct assumption, then the conclusion will break down in the presence of its negated version. Why? Because if that correct assumption is not there, you can break the conclusion down. Okay, why? It just comes from that definition of an assumption. It's an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to hold true. If the answer choice is not must be true, which means it's the incorrect answer choice, it's an answer choice that's confusing you, then the conclusion will not break down in the presence of negated instance. We're going to also see an example of that. Okay. Same argument. Let's take a very simple answer choice, which is a score of 500 on the GMAT is not a good score. Let's see, is this a correct assumption? Okay. We take this statement and we ask ourselves the same question, is that must be true? And which means, will the conclusion break down or will Joe get admission if the statement to the left is no longer true? So if this statement is no longer true, its negated instance becomes true, okay, which means that a score of 500 becomes a good score. Now, if a score of 500 is a good score, will Joe get admission? Absolutely not. Why? Because according to the argument, the argument is not predicated on whether the score of 500 is a good score or a bad score. In other words, you could have changed 500 by 700 or 750. The logic of the argument would still remain the same. And that's an example of when you look at this and say, hey, how can you use that must be true aspect? Now, many of you would be saying, hey, I could have figured it out by myself. Why do I need to go through this complex process to weed out incorrect answer choices and select the correct answer choice? And for simple questions, you're right. But as questions get more sophisticated, you're going to find this becomes your go-to method to solve questions. And we're going to demonstrate that today. But in other words, what's really important is that must be true will help you narrow down. For the correct answer, the conclusion will break down when you negate that answer choice. For the incorrect answer, the conclusion will continue to hold true in the presence of the negated version of that answer choice. That's your takeaway from this. Okay, now we have a foundation. Now we kind of know what an assumption is. We kind of know how to look at statements. We can now build upon it and learn how to pre-think. Okay. Now, some of you have been saying the audio seems to break down. Remember this, that you need, for this to work, you need a reliable internet connection that has a download speed of about 200 kilobits per second. It's not a lot, but it's still a consistent download speed. And if you're using a cellular connection, their speeds may go up and down, and that's where you may not get the consistency. So I would recommend to use a regular, proper internet connection, not a cellular connection. Okay, so we're going to now do pre-thinking on some really interesting arguments. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you an argument, just the argument, no answer choices yet. I'm going to ask you to do your pre-thinking. I'm going to give you 3 minutes, so ample amount of time to spend on pre-thinking. Then I say 2 minutes, I'll give you 3. I'm going to, once we look at your pre-thinking, we'll then look at how to do pre-thinking in a systematic manner. And then we're going to evaluate a couple of submissions over there to really see why they were correct or incorrect. Okay, so with that, let me put in a short answer poll. We already have one. I'm going to clear the poll. And let me pause my video. I'm going to quickly go through this. Essentially, when you're doing this, because you'll have ample time, don't worry about timing. Read the argument slowly. Ask the right questions. Okay. Make sure you have a pen and paper. Make sure you have a bottle of water. And here is your first argument. Good luck, guys. You have to find the assumption. What do you think that the author assumes in this argument? Okay, guys, get those responses in. I have 21 responses. I'm going to give you another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me broadcast your responses so that you guys can read them. You can see very different, very interesting responses. Rewards are to be given to emphasis on research. Faculty's outside tenure focus less on student enhancing student learning. I'd say the a couple of good responses, but overall the responses seem to me to be all over the place. Okay, let's kind of look at how to approach this, and you still have these so you can read them. The way to pre-think is the first piece is to understand which statement is the conclusion. Okay, then you understand the logic that the author uses to arrive at the conclusion, and then we ask a particular pre-thinking question, and as we ask that question, the assumptions jump right at us. Okay, let's see what that question is. And that question is not rocket science. It's something that's based on the very definition of an assumption. So what is an assumption? It's an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to remain valid, which means that without the assumption, the conclusion will break down. So if your assumption is supposed to be that shield that prevents the conclusion from breaking down, then your assumption has to be built around those scenarios in which the conclusion breaks down. Why? Because, hey, that's what it has to prevent it from. And so hence, to find assumptions, what we need to figure out is under what scenarios does the conclusion break down. We can figure out those scenarios. The assumption very simply is that those scenarios do not occur or are impossible. Okay. So the question, and this is really important, you want to write this down, that we need to ask is, under what circumstances, given the facts and the argument, will the conclusion break down? Okay. Here is the same argument that we had, and what I've done is I've divided this argument into 3 independent statements, and I want you to tell me which statement is your main conclusion. And let me put in a poll question over here. Man, where is my poll question? Just give me, yeah, here is my poll question here. Which statement is the main conclusion? Here is the poll. I'm going to remove broadcast results. Don't choose statement 4. There is no statement 4. I use this poll again for another question. So choose statements 1, 2, or 3. Ignore option 4 over here, please. Let's get a few more responses. I have 50 plus responses for this particular question. Question is, which statement is the main conclusion? Three, 2, and 1. Okay, here's what you see. You see that half the class thinks statement 2 is the main conclusion. About a quarter of you think statement 1 is, another quarter thinks statement 3 is the main conclusion. And again, the majority over here is correct. Statement 2 indeed is the main conclusion. Now, what is the main conclusion? A main conclusion is something that the author is trying to assert, trying to make you believe. And when you look at this argument, what the author wants to make you believe is statement number 2, which is that, hey, clearly the difference between professors in the tenure system and other full-time lecturers has to do with the reward system for the former, which is the professors in the tenure system. Okay, this is what the author wants you to believe. Statement number 1 tells you that, hey, there's a recently published paper that concludes that tenure professors or those on their way to tenure enhance student learning less than full-time lecturers who are outside the tenure system. So it presents the result of a paper. And a lot of people think statement 1 is the main conclusion. Why? Because it has this word called concludes. But remember, in an argument, the main conclusion always belongs to the author. And what the author wants you to believe is this particular statement. Now, let's talk about statement 3 over here. Why is statement 3 not the main conclusion?
And to do that, ask yourself, what is statement 3? Statement 3 is a supporting statement which is written to make statement 2 more believable. So 3 is written to make 2 more believable. Hence, it's not what the author wants you to believe. It's to strengthen what the author wants you to believe. Okay, it's written to support the main conclusion. And statement 1 is the context. It sets the stage for your entire argument. Is that part clear? Yes, no? For those of you, for half of you who were confused. Okay. So, what's our pre-thinking question? The pre-thinking question is that under what circumstances would the reward system not be responsible for difference in performance? Now, the very important thing over here that you need to understand. The author in this argument, he is not disputing the difference in performance. He wants to figure out what is the cause of the difference in performance. So to break and according to the author, it's the reward system that is the cause of the difference in performance. Now, because we want to break the conclusion, we really ask this falsification question. Under what circumstances would the reward system not be responsible for the difference in performance? Why? Because we want to figure out under what scenarios can my conclusion break down. Given that we already know that full-time lecturers enhance student performance more than professors do, and the reward system for professors places greater emphasis on research than on teaching. Okay, given these two things, and let's kind of move forward. Again, same question over here. What are some of the possible scenarios in which you cannot blame the reward system for the difference in performance? One is if the non-tenured faculty has identical reward system, right? If both the groups, tenured and non-tenured, they have identical reward system, then you can't blame the reward system for the difference in performance. Clearly, it has to be something else. Is that clear? If non-tenured faculty has an identical reward system, then you can't blame the reward system for the difference in performance. I'd like to see a few more yeses. Okay. The second piece is if there's information given that most tenured professors do not act as per the reward system. Okay. You can have a reward system, but if tenured faculty doesn't act as per the reward system, then you can't blame the reward system. Okay. Someone says nothing is mentioned. Avik says nothing is mentioned about the reward system for non-tenured faculty. So yes, good. In each of these scenarios, and there could be a couple more, the conclusion will break down. Take a look at this. Can you see this? In each of these scenarios, you can't blame the reward system for difference in performance. If non-tenured has the same reward system, or if tenured doesn't care about the reward system. Can you guys see that? Okay. If these are your falsification scenarios, then what are your assumptions? The assumptions is these scenarios do not happen, which means non-tenured professors do not have an identical reward system, and most tenured professors should care about the reward system. Those are your assumptions. Okay. And when you look at these assumptions, look at the inherent simplicity, the direct attack on logic, you're going to find that they attack the logic of the argument very precisely. They are very, very simple. And when you look at them, and you can really say, hey, this has to be the assumption. Okay, and this is very different from the assumption that you guys had put in many instances over there. But the key thing over here that you want to understand is when you ask that pre-thinking question in a methodical fashion, you see the falsification scenarios jump right at you. Once you have those falsification scenarios, coming up with assumptions is like this. It's very, very simple. Okay. I'm going to move forward over here. Some of you actually made this statement, which is an incorrect statement, but I'm going to give you the session PDF for this. Some of you really said were asking, "Hey, how do you learn how to negate?" We've probably written which is the most authoritative word on on how to negate statements. Um, some of it is a part of our inference course. A lot of it is just in general how to negate statements, and Komal would be happy to share the link with you. Okay, now how many of you are worried that this seems to take a lot of time? How many of you are worried about it? Good. And you should be. It's good. When concerns are there, they should be brought to surface. When you go through a pre-thinking journey, it's a journey of skill building. And like any skill building journey, when you start to learn a new skill, it will take you more time. So I'm going to show you the journey that you'll go through as you go and master pre-thinking. Let's say you are this guy who's starting at step number one. And what is step number one? On y-axis, you have accuracy of questions. On an x-axis, you have time to answer questions. I've just put them into low, medium, and high. I've not put any numbers over here. Why? Because with upwards of 100 students here, everyone would be in a different bracket. Low, medium, and high would be different for you. So let's kind of look at this and say, let's say your time to answer questions is medium, your accuracy is low. When you start doing pre-thinking, what would happen is that you're going to observe two things. One is your accuracy will go up, so you're going to go in this direction, but your time to answer questions will also go up. The first 15 questions that you try pre-thinking on, for most of you, that's going to happen. And you're going to ask yourself, you're going to say, why the hell am I doing this? I'm already concerned about timing because everyone freaks me out. Everyone keeps on telling me that timing on the verbal section is really critical. So why am I trying to follow this approach that is increasing my time to answer questions? At that point in time, all I want you to be is be a believer. Continue believing in pre-thinking. As you continue believing in pre-thinking, as you solve questions methodically, a couple of things will happen. One is your accuracy will continue to go up. Your time to answer questions will come down. And at that point in time, you're going to really see, now I understand why pre-thinking works and how pre-thinking works. Uh, and once you go from that 2 to 3, you're never going to look back from pre-thinking. And as you continue practicing this, building the skill more and more, this is what you're going to do. Okay. In fact, if you go back, look at the debriefs that have been posted over the last 3 months on GMAT Club Share, GMAT Experience, 70% of them will talk about pre-thinking. In fact, even students who are not e-GMAT students but just have attended this webinar and were towards the last leg of their preparation, some of them, even those guys, talk about pre-thinking and how it has helped them. Okay. This is what we call as a level 1, level 2, and level 3 pre-thinker. Here are some success stories of students, and these are just a few. On GMAT Club, you're going to find upwards of 100 of these. One of the students says, understand the passage completely. Take your time. Equally important, pre-think and answer before looking at the answer choice. Probably this one word will have the most impact on your GMAT score. There's a guy who scored 740. That's the link to a success story. Then there's one, probably the most popular success story of 2019. Is a guy who improved from 700 to 770. He improved his CR ability from 39 percentile to 96 percentile in 2 weeks. And he said when it gets to 700 level questions, you have to do pre-thinking. The reason to do pre-thinking is to help you focus on the logic and not deviate from the key argument when a trap or out of scope answer choice show up. Again, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see his success story. You can see his unedited interview. And there's another one. It says, pre-thinking primes the mind. We are constantly on our toes while reading an RC passage. So pre-thinking is really important in RC as well, or a CR question stem. Apart from comprehending the passage, we keep speculating that in which direction the passage will orient or what logical jump has the author taken. So again, guy who got a 220 point score improvement All right. So with that, let's go to our second example. Let me hide this. The second example is an official question. It is something that will tell you how to apply pre-thinking, and if you don't apply pre-thinking, if you don't understand what an assumption is, you would be confused. Let me put in the poll question over here. Here is the poll question. All right, guys, another 30 seconds. Get those. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let's end the poll. And I'm going to put in a short answer pod over here before I broadcast the results. And so, how are the answer choices? How did the answer choices feel when you looked at this? Okay, very close. Yes, they are. This is a very interesting official question in which there are 4 strengtheners and only one of those uh, is, is, um, is actually an assumption. There are actually 4 of them are close by the same logic. So those of you thinking B is a close answer choice, if you look at the logic in C and D, you're going to find it's fairly similar too. Um, Let me broadcast as well so you can see how the group polled. And choices B, choice D, choices B and E were very popular. E is the correct answer. And I'm going to look at why is E the correct answer and why are the other choices not the correct answer. But before we do that, can you tell me what is an assumption? What's the definition of an assumption? Because we're going to use that definition of an assumption and pre-thinking, both of those over here. What's the definition of an assumption? It's an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to hold true. So just remember that part. And this, the reason why I have this question in this argument in the session is because it clarifies that must be true aspect very well. So conclusion not difficult to find here. Statement 2 is your conclusion. And what is the highway commissioner claiming? He's claiming that the toll increase will increase the annual revenue by at least 50%. Okay. So what's going on? We need to finance road repairs, and to do that, the highway commission is considering a 50% increase on the toll per mile, and the current toll per mile is 10 cents. Okay. And the commissioner claims that, hey, by doing that, the revenue generated would be at least 50% higher next year. Okay. So how do you estimate annual revenue? Let me just hide this over here. How do you estimate annual revenue? What is that formula? And let me clear the answers. How do you estimate annual revenue? No, what's the formula? What's the formula to estimate annual revenue? Revenue is not profit minus cost. I don't know what profit minus cost is. Okay. Annual revenue is toll per mile multiplied by the total number of miles traveled. Okay. Revenue is not profit minus cost. Please. Profit is revenue minus cost. Okay. Toll miles into the cost per mile. Is that clear? Can everyone see this on the slide? Annual revenue is toll per mile multiplied by the total number of toll miles, right? Perfect. Now, it's as simple as that. So what's our pre-thinking question? If this is the annual revenue, then the pre-thinking question again remains the same. Under what circumstances, given the facts in the argument, will the conclusion break down? Which means the question that we are asking is, under what circumstances the annual revenue will not increase by 50%, provided that the toll per mile has been increased by 50%. So what is the only scenario in which the annual revenue will not increase by at least 50%? If we already know that this part over here, toll per mile, is higher by 50%. If miles are less than previous year, if the total number of miles decrease, right? So falsifying scenario is if the total number of miles decreases. If that number decreases, then you can't say this annual revenue will grow up by 50%. Okay, that's the only condition. So what's the assumption? The total number of miles driven does not decrease. Is that clear? That's the only must be true condition. Fairly simple. Himanshu is asking, what's the level of this question? Himanshu, it's a 700 level question, given that the accuracy is about 32% over here. Okay, now which answer choice talks about the total number of miles here? And I understand some of you are concerned about why is choice B, choice C, or choice D not the correct answer. We're going to look at that. But the only answer choice that talks about the total number of miles is choice E. Why? Because we look at the total distance traveled over here will not decrease from its current level. Okay. Now, some of you may be asking, how many of you are confused to really say, hey, why is choice B wrong then? And let's kind of look at choice B. Choice B says the total number of trips made on the toll highway per year will not decrease from its current level. All right. So let's kind of focus on B, and if you have doubts about any other answer choice, I'm going to address that. So over here, and then so we have this answer choice, and then it says, so we ask the question, does this mean that the total number of miles traveled on toll roads will decrease? Does it mean that the total number of miles traveled on toll roads will go down if the number of trips go down? Does it necessarily mean? No, you can't say that. What if the length of trip goes up, right? So the answer is not really, because the total miles traveled may still remain the same or even higher if the number of miles per trip increases. Okay. So if that is the case, then can you really say that this must be true? Can you say that this choices must be true? No, you can't say that it must be true. Who says, let me just look at this. Akshay, we are not talking about the length of highway. We're talking about the length of trip. What's the difference between the length of trip and a length of highway? Your highway may be 100 miles long. Your trip could just be 10 miles long. Okay. Remember, the key question which is there is it must be true, or will the conclusion break down if this statement isn't true? And the answer to that over here is not really. That's not going to be the case. Now, choice A, someone says the amount of money required annually. Do we care about the amount of money required annually, whether that will increase from its current level? No, we don't care about that. Okay. Choice C talks about the average length of the trip. The average length of the trip can go down, the number of trips can go up to compensate for that, and hence it is also not must be true. Choices B, C, and D are all excellent strengtheners. Okay, they're not irrelevant. They are all excellent strengtheners over here. B, C, and D. If this were a strengthened question, B, C, D, and E were, each one of these would have been a correct answer choice. Okay, but because this is an assumption question, only choice E, which satisfies that must be true condition, is your correct answer. Remember, an assumption will always be a strengthener. Not every strengthener will be an assumption. Okay. The number of drivers who consistently avoid highway tolls by using secondary roads will not increase. Let's say the number of drivers increase. So right now, let's say, 1,000 drivers avoid toll highways. Now that number increases to 1,500. Could the drivers who actually drive on toll highways not compensate for the miles by driving extra miles? They could, right? For that very same reason. Simona, does that make sense? No? Why does that not? Choice D says the number of drivers who consistently avoid toll highways will not increase from its current level. So let's say that number of drivers does increase. Okay. Earlier, 1,000 drivers used to avoid toll highways. Now, let's say 1,200 drivers avoid toll highways. Now, in this case, the remaining drivers who are there, who are still using toll highways, could drive longer and make up for the miles lost because of the 200 drivers who are avoiding. Okay, good. You understood that. Thank you, Simona. Option C, the average length of the trip. So if the average length of the trip, let's say, goes down by 10 miles, you could actually increase. Uh, let me actually put in a note spot. It's much more easy. Actually, I already have the notes. What is the total number of miles? Is the number of trips multiplied by average length of trip. Okay. Now, if average length of the trip decreases, then the total number of trips can increase to make up for that shortfall. If the number of trips, that number decreases, then the average length can increase to make up for that shortfall. That's why neither of these statements is a must be true. Okay. They are strengtheners, but not. Okay. Now we're going to do two full length questions. We're going to up the ante. We're going to make questions even more challenging, and which means pre-thinking starts to become even more interesting. All right. We're going to do these two questions back to back. And I don't want to time you guys on these questions. What I want to do is I want you to select this option which says not answered. So that I know how many of you are actually attempting this question. So if you could select not answered, and then once you're done with once you have an answer, you're going to choose one of the other answer choices, and I would then know that, hey, people are able to answer this question. So when 80% of the group really chooses an answer choice other than not answered, I'm going to call time. So that way you as a group are going to govern how long you take. All right, I want 50 people to select not answered. I have 85 people in the group right now. I want at least 50 of you to choose not answered. 31, 33, 36, 37, and make sure you have a pen and paper here because these questions are difficult. I want you to write stuff down. 42, 43, another 7 to choose. 45, another 5, 46. Let's get 4 more people, guys. Come on. Move that mouse. 49, one more person. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to remove broadcast results. Here is your first question. Good luck, guys. It's a difficult question. Read the question. Okay, guys, another 40 seconds. Half the people, or actually 60% of the class is done right now. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Pretty much everyone is done actually. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results so you can see how you polled. Choice A, B, and D were most popular, or actually really popular. Pretty much everyone chose one of these three answer choices. That's great. Let me hide this. We're going to solve the next question and then I'm going to discuss both these questions together. Actually, before I show this, I want to get the same thing. You guys know the drill. I want you to select not answered. Want half, at least 50 folks to select not answered. 29, 30, 41, 43, 47, 48. Let's get two more. 50 folks to select not answered. 49, or one of the other answer choices if you want to venture into it without looking at the question. And one more guy. All right, 50. Perfect. Um, Let me remove broadcast results, and here is the argument. Good luck, guys. All right, guys, almost 80% of the class is done. About 76% of you are done. 80% is done right now. Another 15 seconds for you to get those answers in. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Broadcast the results. You can see about 89% of the class was done. Choice D, really popular, but 42% of you chose choice D. Choices C and E were also quite popular, as was choice A. Let's just see this. I'm going to hide this over here. I'm going to actually bring back my video, and we're going to start back with our prior question, which was RDS technologies. Here are the answer choices for RDS technologies. Let me bring in my webcam, and because we're going to go into the discussion mode, I think the webcam would be a bit more helpful. All right, so RDS technologies. This is how you polled. I want you guys to tell me how you felt while solving this question. And here is my short answer pod. Let me just resize the poll. How did you feel while solving this question? How did it feel, this particular question? Okay, lost. Couldn't understand the meaning properly. Good. Confused. It's a difficult question. It's probably the most difficult, most sophisticated argument that many of you would actually see. Here's something that I will tell you. When the answer choices are close, if they feel close to you, it's a classic indication that you have not understood the argument. Okay, if you understand the argument, it's very easy, as one of you said. So let's kind of see this now. What's the conclusion? The conclusion is statement number 4, which is that the number of Verlanders receiving special program information did not increase significantly between these two time periods. Now, let's just focus on this statement over here. This is my conclusion, the most important statement in the argument. And one thing I want you to take away from this, and you may want to write this down, when arguments become more complex, conclusion becomes a lot more important, and you need to slow down even more and extract information from the conclusion. What does statement number 4 say? Well, I mean, in terms of what can you extract from statement number 4, which is your conclusion? One is that we're talking about, and let me actually pause my video so you don't need to see my ceiling. One is the conclusion. I need to get my correct annotation. The conclusion talks about special program information. Okay. And the second is we are talking about this time period, which is 94 to 96. Can everyone see that? Can everyone see that the conclusion talks about special program information and 94 to 96? Okay. How many of you actually extracted this piece over here? And Patrick, I actually can move my webcam off if that's the case. If missed this, okay. And the reason why I want to make sure you understand this is, had you extracted this piece of information, you would have rejected 3 out of 5 answer choices right away, even without looking at the argument. Okay. And again, I'm not trying to tell you a trick. I'm just trying to tell you just the importance of conclusion here. This is not a method that I would recommend that you follow. Okay. This is something which I want to make sure that you understand the importance of conclusion. Why? Because just by understanding the conclusion, you'd be able to reject quite a few answer choices. So, and again, just to make a case in point, choice D was very popular over here. Now, what kind of programming just choice do you talk about? What kind of programming does it talk about? Choice D. Any programming. Okay, it talks about any programming. Okay, does it talk about special programming? Not at all, right? If it doesn't talk about special programming, can choice D be correct? Given that conclusion talks about special programming, the conclusion is only focused on special programming. No, it can't be correct. Just a case in point. You guys were confused with choice D. Had you focused on the conclusion, you would have been able to reject it. But we're going to go through our proper method. I'm not going to try and sell shortcuts to you. That's not what we do. But just the importance of conclusion. Okay, so what are we saying here? We're saying that the number of Verlanders who received this special program information did not increase significantly between the periods of 94 and 96. This is what the author is trying to say. Now let's see, why do we say that? There are two things that happened between 94 and 96. One, the number of RDS equipped radios remained the same. These are the radios that people have in their house on which people receive information. Okay, and then the number of transmitting stations, which is the stations that transmit information, they more than doubled. They increased from 250 to 600. Okay, and then what else is there? The first statement sets some context. It says, hey, radio stations, the transmitting stations with RDS technology, these radio stations broadcast special program information that only radios that have an RDS feature can receive. Essentially, what it's saying is, if you want to receive that special program information, you need to have an RDS radio. You need to be in the range of a transmitting station that has RDS technology. Is the argument clear? Okay. Now, let's follow our approach. So, what's the conclusion? Between 94 and 96, very few, it doesn't talk about range. Okay. When I say in range, what it's saying is if you are connected to it, it's radio, so range is kind of an implied thing in many ways. So between 94 and 96, very few additional Verlanders received RDS programs. That's your conclusion. Why does the author say that? Because between 94 and 96, the number of receiving radios, the radios that people have in their houses, the radios that on which people listen to programs, they remain almost unchanged. The number of transmitting stations increased tremendously. And the context says, hey, if you want to receive that special program information, you need both the special radios and you need the transmitting station. Okay. Is this logical structure clear? Let me actually clear this. Okay, it's clear, many of you are saying. Perfect. So what's our falsification question? A falsification question tries to break the conclusion down. So the question we ask is, under what conditions will there be a significant addition to the number of people who are receiving RDS programming, given that we have very few additional radios between 94 and 96, and we have a lot more transmitting stations. So what are some of the possible scenarios in which there will be a significant addition to the number of people who are receiving this RDS programming? Can you guys come up with some scenarios? Okay, you can't have people having more radios with RDS. Why? Because the number of radios remains the same. Wider coverage is good. Okay, then wider coverage is good. What else? People without RDS receive special programming. That is not possible as per the conditions given in the argument. You can't go against the conditions given in the argument. Okay, and then the other option which is there, and who came up with this option is Raman came up if more people using the same number of radios. That's a great option too. Yes. One is if the coverage improves, which means, hey, because we added these transmitting stations, people earlier who had the right kind of radio but were not covered are covered now. The second thing is if we start putting these radios in Starbucks, so more people listen to these radios, in that case also, more worldlanders will be able to receive special programs. Okay. So what are the two possible scenarios? If the coverage improves. The second is if people per radio increases. If these two happen, your conclusion will break down. I want everyone to read both of these conditions and tell me whether they make sense to you. The conclusion will be shattered in each one of these scenarios. If that's the case, then what are my assumptions? That the new station should increase coverage or people per radio remain about the same. Either one of them is a good assumption. So let's look at how we polled over here. Here's how we polled. Choice A was 25%, choice B was 26%, choice D, which we already have said is incorrect, was about 30%. Our correct answer choice is choice A. Let's see why we say that. Okay. The choice A says few, if any, of the RDS radio stations that began broadcasting in Verland after 1994 broadcast to people with RDS equipped radios living in areas not previously reached by RDS stations. Very sophisticated answer choice. It's worded, I mean, it's convoluted. I mean, I'll tell you, a native speaker of English language will have a lot of trouble with this. Even a native speaker would. Let's kind of look at this and let's make this simple. Now we're going to take segments of this answer choice and simplify those segments. Few, if any, means almost none of the RDS stations that began broadcasting after 94. Which are the RDS stations that began broadcasting after 94? These are your new stations. Broadcast to people with RDS equipped radios living in areas not previously reached. Really long part. What it simply means is increasing the coverage. Okay. Almost none of the new RDS stations increase the coverage of RDS programming. That's what each of these three segments mean. Sit back, look at this and tell me, are you able to extract this information and come to the simplified statement? Okay. Those of you who are saying no, I'm not saying were you able to. Now when you look at this, are you able to do this? When you look at those segments, and if your answer is no still, now if you can do this now, then say yes. If you still can't do it, then I want you to tell me which segment do you have a problem with. All right, because I'm not getting a question, because I don't have a proper question, I would move forward. So what this is saying is almost none of the new radio stations increase the coverage of RDS programming. If you negate this statement, what would this statement mean? At least some radio stations increase coverage, and if at least some radio stations increase coverage, what happens? Your conclusion breaks down. Okay, you guys can look at this. Lakshya says, how come few, if any, means almost none? It's a good question. Let's take an example. Whenever you're confused, the best way is to take an example. Okay, let me take an example here. I'm going to actually bring in a new notes pane, and let's just increase the font to about 24. Few, if any, of when I say this, few, if any shares appreciated, or let's call it tech stock, appreciated in the market today. What am I saying? Am I not saying almost none of the tech stocks? Am I not saying this? Right? So few, if any, is almost none. And that's why if you read the negation article, you're going to get all of this. If you've gone through our inference module, you would get all of this. That's why the first thing we teach you is in very, very comprehensive um, manner is how do you read statements? Why? Because if you don't know how to read statements, you can't extract information out of them. Few, if any, is not some. Is not some. Some includes the coverage of few, if any, but it also some also means that pretty much everyone. Okay, and that's where you need to logically compare things. Few, if any, is not some. And again, that's where you have to say when the author is saying few, if any, the author is saying, I don't know, maybe a few, but I don't know how many. But when you're saying that some people did this, and that's where understanding, not just knowing this logical piece, but understanding this is really important. Few of any of x, y, and let's kind of look at the same example. Okay, so what is the author saying over here? The author, in a way, the emotion that the author is telling is, I don't know how many. Probably it could be 0. Okay, that's the emotion that the author is saying. Now, if I say some tech stocks appreciated today, okay, what am I saying as an author? I'm saying at least one technology stock do you see the difference here? A very subtle difference, but a very important difference. When I say some technology stocks, I'm very certain that at least one did. When I say few, if any, I don't know if any did. And that's why it's important to understand it. And again, if you want to be that 90 or 95th percentile guy, if you want to say, I am the best in logic that exists worldwide, you've got to get that difference. And that's where reading the explanations. Few, if any, is yes, you can call them similar, but few, if any, means that I don't know if any did. Okay. So few, if any, is a slightly stronger emotion. But yes, it's very few is probably the closest I would take to it. Okay. So choice A breaks your conclusion down and is the correct answer. Now, choice B, very popular answer choice. Now, what does choice B says? In 1996, most Verlanders who lived within the listening area of an RDS station already had the right kind of radio. That's kind of um, what the choice is. So essentially what it says is, hey, if you lived within a covered area, you had an RDS radio. The question that I want you to ask is, what is my conclusion? The number of people receiving special program information in 94 and 96, that number remained almost the same. So if that's my conclusion, I want you to tell me, for that number to remain the same, is this a must be true? If I live within the covered area, is it necessary that I should have an RDS equipped radio? Is that a must be true? Is that a requirement? What if 20% of people in 94 had an RDS equipped radio and 20% had in 94 and 20% had the RDS equipped radio in 96? Would the conclusion still not be true? It would. Okay, which is why this is incorrect. And that's where, if you're confused, if you have that understanding of assumption in your mind, you're going to find it's very easy to reject answer choices. This is not a close answer choice at all. Equipping a radio station with RDS technology does not decrease a station's listening area. Again, some of you chose this, and for me, it's completely irrelevant. Why? If you want to go into the technicalities of it, if a radio station or transmitting station does not have RDS technology, can it even transmit RDS programming? Yes or no? If a radio station does not have RDS technology, can it even transmit RDS programming? The answer is no, as per the argument. Okay. So in mathematical terms, what is the range of special programming from a radio station that does not have RDS technology? In pure mathematical terms. Any geeky engineers out here? Zero. The answer is zero. I mean, without RDS programming, without RDS technology, you can't transmit RDS programming anyway. So the answer is, so there is no range there. Okay. So if you equip a radio station and its range decreases, what kind of programming are we talking about here? It is non-special programming. It is other programming. And in my conclusion, do I care about other programming? Absolutely not. So this choice is irrelevant. This is by inference. You can say, hey, other programming is not mentioned, but yeah, but everything else that's there in the argument allows you to infer this. Let's look at choice D. Now, let's read choice D. In Verlanders, in 1996, my apologies, Verlanders who did not own radios equipped to receive RDS. Do we care about people who did not own RDS radios? Do we care about them, people who don't have the right kind of radios? We don't care about them. Why? Because we know they can't receive special programming. Could not receive any programming. Do we care about any programming here? Absolutely not. So if you understood the conclusion, you would have just rejected this answer choice for these two reasons. We don't care about people who don't have RDS radio. We don't care about any programming. This can't be my answer. And type of programming, again, irrelevant. Okay, difficult question, seemingly difficult question, statistically also difficult question, but from a logic standpoint, not a very difficult question. So what did you learn from this? And I'm going to put in my webcam there. What did you learn from this question? What did you learn from the mistakes over here? Pay attention to conclusion, number one. What else? Yes, meaning is everything. You've got to read statements. The other piece which is there is when you did pre-thinking, when you asked that falsification question, you were able to come up with two assumptions. And try to frame sentences in your own words. Yes, it's about understanding statements. Angiras Shivansh says, and it's a really good statement here. He says, I'm very concerned about my ability to think this through. I wouldn't have been able to come up with assumptions on my own because the question just didn't say anything about the area covered, how to develop this vision or logic. Very, very good. Really, really good concern. And I'm really glad you brought it forward because I'm sure others are actually feeling the same way about this question as well. Now remember, what did we talk about in the very beginning? It's about acing the GMAT is about building a skill. Pre-thinking is about building a skill. And this is a difficult question. I don't expect a lot of you to do this question, but not yet at least. But that's where learning the course progressively, learning and solving questions progressively is very important. Why? Because when you go through a progressive fashion, you can build that ability, build that visualization ability. Why? Because when I do questions, you guys can really see you're able to visualize them. And I wasn't born this way. I had to build the skill. And the best way to build the skill is to move progressively. That's why you have to solve questions progressively. That's why you need those detailed solutions. That's why you need a system that gives you feedback as to where do you need to go back, revise those things. Because acing the GMAT is not about solving questions. In fact, people who solve more questions don't ace the GMAT. We actually did a study where we looked at stats from about 600 students. We looked at about 300,000 data points, and that's the conclusion that we came up with. That study is published on GMAT Club. In fact, if you Google what causes success on the GMAT, you're going to get to that article or that study. It's about a 3,000 word long study. Okay, but really good question. You may not be able to do this today, but if you solve close to 200 CR questions, get feedback on them, you'd be able to do this in 10 days. Okay, let's go to Shelby will refuse. You guys did a lot better on this question, and there's a reason why you did a lot better on this question. Why? Because for many of you, that ability is starting to build up. This is how you guys polled for Shelby will refuse. Okay, and again, 42% of you got this right. Choice D indeed was the correct answer. Again, this is still a 700 level question. Any question where the accuracy is lower than 50% is a 700 level question. Okay, so I want to make sure you have a very thorough understanding of this. I'm going to bring in my poll question here. So what's happening here? Last year, we collected a ton of garbage or refuse. We didn't recycle any garbage. We actually sent everything for incineration. Incineration is burning, and this incineration generated a lot of residual ash. Now, how many trucks? I couldn't get a good icon for a truck. So how many trucks did we send for incineration? Assume one garbage can is one truck. So how many garbage cans do you count here? How many garbage cans do you see over here? About 10. Yes, there are 10 garbage cans. So we send 10 trucks for incineration. Now, according to the argument, we want to reduce the amount of residual ash. So if we collect the same amount of refuse this year, how many garbage cans or trucks am I going to send for incineration this year if I collect the same amount of refuse? We're going to send 5 trucks for incineration. Why? Because you're going to save 5 for recycling. Okay, but I'm going to send 5 trucks for incineration. Now, here is my question to you. If instead of collecting the same amount of refuse, if I collect 10 times as much refuse, if the amount of garbage collected is 10 times as much, then in that case, how many trucks do you think I'm going to send for incineration this year? The question is, if I collect 10 times as much refuse, if I collect 10 times as much refuse, how many trucks do you think I'm going to send for incineration this year? I want to make sure you guys have truly understood this argument, because answering this question is key to understanding this argument. And that's the reason why I have this argument in the session. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. 60% of you think the answer is 50. 60% of you will be wrong. The correct answer is just 5 trucks. Just 5 trucks. And I'll tell you why. Let's read this statement here. This year, city services will separate for recycling enough refuse to reduce the number of truckloads to be incinerated to half of last year's number. Again, what are we saying? The author is saying that regardless of the amount of refuse collected, I'm only going to send half as many truckloads for incineration as were sent last year. Okay, even if you collect 10 times as much, the number of truckloads of incineration, truckloads that I'm going to send for to be incinerated is going to be half of last year's number. Can you guys see this? Right? I'm only going to get 5 truckloads, even if you collect 100 truckloads worth of refuse. Now, if I'm only going to get 5 truckloads of refuse, then what must be true for my conclusion to hold true? The only condition that needs to be true for my conclusion to hold true? That the refuse produced per truckload should not be more than what it was last year, right? It shouldn't be that each of these truckloads that is being sent produces so much ash, the ash produced, that you know, it just, yeah, per truckload the ash produced should be similar or less. We have everything over here. I think we've already discussed this. We already discussed this as well. The falsification is, under what conditions will the residual ash generated be greater than 50%, even if only half as many truckloads are sent for incineration? The only possible scenario is if the ash generated per truckload is higher than what was generated on a per truckload basis. Sorry about that. I guess we lost internet connectivity. I think we are all back right now. Is the audio loud and clear? If you guys can put in, yeah, it works perfect. Sorry about that. So what's the assumption? The assumption really is that the ash per truckload is similar to or lower than what it was last year. Choice. So sorry, what I was saying was this is one of the only scenarios in which one of the only 5 questions in which one of the answer choices has information that is already included in the argument. Choice B talks about the cost. We are not trying to worry about the cost. Our goal is to worry about the amount of residual ash. Okay. Choice C talks about the proportion of recyclable materials. Do we care about the proportion of recyclable materials? No. Why? Because we are only going to send half as many truckloads for incineration. Okay. Choice D talks about the ash generated per truckload, which is what we talked about. You negate this, you're going to find that your conclusion will break down. Choice E talks about the total quantity of refuse. We already discussed this case. Doesn't matter why, because we are only going to send half as many truckloads. Again, you have the negation test and you're going to see it fails. So again, very simply, when it comes to pre-thinking, it's developing a skill. And one of the things that you're going to notice is that when you do pre-thinking, you're not just it's not just about pre-thinking, it's about developing better reading habits. It's about understanding the information given to you. The other thing that you would also notice is there are no tricks here. It's about pure skill development. And this is a skill which is critical to not just acing the GMAT, but also evaluating things in life in general. It's a very critical skill when it comes to the managerial aspect of your job, which is going to be in your MBA as well as in the post MBA part of it. Okay, so the thing that I want you to think about is that none of this was rocket science. I mean, all I did was I read the arguments better. I built visualization. I kind of visualized what I read, and then I asked the right questions. And if you do this consistently, you're going to find that you do this in much more quickly, and your accuracy, your hit rate will go up. So what are some of the next steps? The first thing that I want you to do is, if you've not gone through the prerequisites, make sure you go through the prerequisites. I want you to go through the lessons on introduction to assumption, logical gap, and two entities. Each of these lessons actually has pre-assessment, post-assessment quizzes, so you get feedback on them right away. Because I've not attempted these, that's why you don't see this. But each of these is about 20 to 30 minutes long. I want you to go through them. It'll lay the foundation. Then I want you to practice some questions over here. If you are a paid student, you actually have 3 times as much content on pre-thinking, just on pre-thinking. If you're a paid student, I want you to go through this entire module logically, starting with building the foundation and premise and conclusion, then going through the inference module, then going through the assumption module, and evaluate strength and weak and boldface and paradox. In each of these core modules, you're going to see multiple concept files. You're going to see multiple feedback points in each concept file. Then you're going to see multiple application files as well as practice quizzes. And you also will see relevant questions from official quizzes. You'll get feedback at each of these points. In the entire CR course, you get feedback 87 times. Okay. Then you also have this Colranium platform on which you can practice this. So overall, when you think about all the full-length questions you're going to be able to apply pre-thinking to, in the CR course, there are about 500 full-length questions. That's about 3 times as many questions as you're going to see in the official guide. The e-GMAT course architecture where we integrate conceptual learning, application learning, and assessments and feedback right then and there, is designed to make sure that you hit that 90th percentile. And 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 and, and, and if you get through the metrics properly, if the feedback's positive for you, and if you take corrective action when you get negative feedback, you're going to find that you're going to hit that 90th percentile fairly consistently. Raman says, when you say ACE, GMAT, and ACR in 10 days, how many hours do we consider we need to put on? Since we would be doing SCRC and Quant. No, Raman, you will not be doing SCRC and Quant. And in the e-GMAT platform, you only do one subsection at one time. If you want to hit the 90th percentile, if you want to be among the top 10% of students, you can't be studying 10 things at once. Okay. Raman says we can't leave any of them since I feel we need to be consistent with all 4 sections. No, Raman, when you're building a skill, you build one skill at a time. If you study all 4 of them, you're not going to get anywhere. Trust me. We would not be the world's most successful GMAT prep company had our students been studying all 4 of those things. Now, the reason why a lot of these prep companies will tell you that you have to study all 3 or all 4 or 5 aspects together is because the classical test prep industry is built on your classroom courses, and you'll have a single instructor teaching you SC and Quant at the same time. So if he's teaching you SC and Quant at the same time for their own efficiency, they can't really say just study SC, don't study Quant, or that way. In an online platform, we don't have that limitation. We want to tell you what's the best for you. If you think about how you study in life, that's how you build skills in life. You focus on just doing one thing. Anirudh says, I'm a bit experienced with the GMAT. I've given it before. The problem is that as I master one skill, I move on to the other and I tend to lose grip. And the problem really is, Anirudh, if that happens, you've not mastered that skill. You've not cemented. When you go through the e-GMAT platform, you go through 3 stages of learning concepts and methods, cementing methods, and mastering to perfection. If you go through those 3 stages of learning, you will not forget it. If you just focus on learning concepts and methods and you move on to the other one, to let's say you go from SC to CR or CR to RC or CR to number properties, you're going to find that you will miss. So you've got to you have to hit certain metrics before you move from one subsection to the other. I mean, case in point, how many of you forget how to drive if you don't drive for 3 months? How many of you do that? You may be slightly rusty, but we'll come back to you in an hour. Why? Because when you learned how to drive, you actually went through learning how to drive, cementing those things, and then achieving that perfection. Is it more efficient to focus on very difficult CR questions only? It is actually very inefficient to focus on more difficult CR questions only. You have to build this progressively. I mean, think about it this way. If you want to bench 200 pounds on a bench press, you just don't go to the gym and say, I'm going to take a 200-pound barbell, or I'm going to take a barbell, put in 200 pounds on it, and start benching. It will kill you. It's the same thing with this. You want to hit that 90th percentile, you've got to first figure out what are you starting with. Then you've got to progressively increase. Anirudh says, how do I make sure that skill is mastered? Anirudh, make sure you hit the cementing metrics. If you're an e-GMAT student, we give you cementing metrics. We give you perfection metrics. If you ask this question, let me actually share some of these metrics with you. I'm going to share a playlist with you on our YouTube channel where we have metrics of people who've hit these, and here is a playlist. It should pop up in the Q&A pod. If you click on it, you'll see a few case studies over there, and the stats are there. If you are a paid student, this is the assumption module for you. Okay, you learn the core concepts, you do level 1 application, and the nice thing about this is for every kind of argument that the test is going to throw at you, we teach you how to pre-think. This lays that foundation for you. Then we teach you how to apply that, then we evaluate you on that, and we give you the relevant official questions. So how do people get to that 90th percentile? They do a few things, not many, but a few things. They solve every question using pre-thinking. They don't time themselves when they're learning the process. In fact, timing will fall in place automatically if you apply pre-thinking. They get more than 80% in that concept quiz. And they review solutions. Now, just to really tell you how comprehensive this is, when you compare this to any other resource out there, it's many times more comprehensive. And when you go through this, one thing that I would request is don't refer to any other resource. You don't need it. Here are some of the other examples. There's a girl who actually went from a V32 to a V46, which is 99 percentile, in about 20 odd days. Okay, this is 20 days of diligent study. I think that's about it from my side. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. And if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to take those. But other than that, I'd be happy to share the PDF with you. Here's the session PDF. Saransh says, if I'm planning to start the GMAT, which book should I use to improve my basics? Saransh, we don't recommend taking any books. I mean, our courses start from just the very foundation. You just notice that the CR course is about 7 times as comprehensive as the next book that you're going to really find out there. Similarly, on the verbal side, we have a course called Master Comprehension, in which we teach we start with a 2-word sentence and extend it to really an 80-word sentence, and to really say how should you learn how to read and extract information from those. Some of you saying, okay, can you see some of the success stories over there of people who've gone from one skill level to the other? I can again share some of those over there. Here are some of these. How long do you need to prepare to get there? It just depends on what your starting score is and what your target score is. If you want to really figure out how long you're going to take, then one thing that I would recommend is that you take a Sigma X mock, and once you've taken a Sigma X mock, we'll know your starting abilities, and you'd be able to create that personalized study plan fairly easily. How can you reach out to me directly? You've been studying since 2017. You can write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com, and my email address is there. Yeah. And again, if you have any other questions, you can always write to me, or you can write to pile@e-gmat.com. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. It was a pleasure hosting this webinar. Also remember, we have the algebra webinar tomorrow. If you've not registered for the same, do register for it as well. Here is the link to that webinar. Also, the strategy webinar, which is in the first webinar in 2020. And again, good luck for your studies. I know many of you are taking the test right away. And if we don't get to talk again, then Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.